I would also like to take a moment to introduce Ashwin. Ashwin is currently working with MX Player as a senior product manager. He has a decade of experience in building and scaling OTT platforms. He has worked with amazing brands like Hotstar and Samsung in the past. So yeah, that's all. Ashwin, please take over the session from here.
Thank you, Piyush. Hi, everyone. A very good evening. I thank pragmatic leaders for this opportunity. I feel it's a great opportunity for me to kind of share my experiences with all of you. Uh, I would be really happy to talk about a lot of things in the next 40 to 50 minutes about um anything related to OTT. A little bit about me, like we have said, I spent about most of my product management or all of my product management career in the OTT space. Before that, I was an engineer for a short, brief time, for about three and a half years before I kind of made my mind to kind of switch to a product management career. What I'm going to do is, shall I share my screen? Yeah, so what I intend to do, at least what I was thinking of doing in this session was to talk about, take this opportunity to probably introduce OTT, the space of OTT to my fellow tech folks, whether in whatever function they are in. So I thought, and mostly I tried talking about basic things, not tried going deep into multiple aspects. So pardon me if I'm not probably, and I've mostly chosen aspects which I have probably worked on and probably experienced or seen. So please do excuse me if I'm not able to cover some of the aspects that some of you might be interested in. Of course, towards the end, as I understand from Piyush, we'll have a Q&A session. So you could probably ask me, and if I'm able to answer some of it, we could discuss those as well. So with that, I shall start. Let me do this. Yeah, can you guys see my screen? Piyush, you good?
Yes, we can.
Okay. What we'll cover today, we'll cover why OTT, right? I think this gathering should understand why OTT, why are we talking about OTT in general, who the major players are, what goes into making, true to the title of this session, I think, what are those components that go in making or building a OTT platform. And then I move on to probably more, which we'll spend the most time on, is talking about the challenges that an OTT platform sees, right? And what are some of the trends or solutions that our platforms have done so far? And what are the trends that could probably shape some of the future from whatever I think, what I've seen so far, right? And we'll end with some of the Q&A. So why is OTT an interesting industry? I think it's no-brainer that so many people are talking about OTT industry, but the true fact is it's just growing multifold over the last decade and is going to continue to grow, like some of the reports that have been published online. It's going to grow to, they say, about 12,000 crores by 2023. That's at about 22 CAGR and 22% CAGR in the last 5 years. The interesting thing about the Indian OTT industry is that most consumption happens on mobile phone, and most of us know that that's probably the fastest growing market for smartphones, right? So it's like being at the right place at the right time for most OTT companies, because they are targeting people on mobile phones, and guess what? People are responding very well to it, right? So it's not just that you have multiple services, but people are engaging more than an hour on a daily basis with OTT platforms. So that talks a lot about the need for entertainment. So there is a market need which is getting satisfied by multiple services today, and there is reception, right, which is evident in the kind of numbers, which is like more than an hour a day is, especially for a new industry which is getting very old, is very, very interesting in my mind, and that leads to why the platform happening, uh, which is there were just 9 platforms, say about 5 years back. When we were starting at start, there were about 6 to 7 platforms. There are 40 OTT platforms, all because they want to cash in on this opportunity, right? All platforms want to cash in on this opportunity. So the space is really getting crowded, and rightfully so, if you ask me. So there are, like we discussed earlier, there are multiple streaming options. We tried putting some logos here. There are the kind of options that we have are a mix of regional. Each platform is trying to create its own niche. Some cater to a regional audience. Some cater to most cater to national audience. Some have a lot more exclusive international content than others, right? And with that, I think what I want to move on is to the next aspect. So what I'm going to do is I kind of put together a diagram as to how an OTT platform is made. Some of these concepts I will come back to in while discussing our challenges, because some parts of these diagrams play a very important role in solving some of the challenges that the OTT industry is facing today. So to kind of explain in brief this particular diagram, the left the left box is essentially all the clients. Clients meaning all your apps, whether it is on your mobile, on your iPad, or whatever screen that you're on, whatever screen and aspect ratio that you're on. Uh, Obviously, all OTT platforms have a backend service, which consists of a content management system, a user management system, a recommendation server, and a search server, right? And when I'm talking about, and each of these, like the name suggests, does its respective work, but a content management system essentially ensures that it's the database to hold all the metadata of the content that is being played, that the catalog that the platform has. A user management system is to kind of map the user behavior or all user details to a particular platform. A recommendation server, like it suggests, is to kind of ensure that the backend, the server kind of ensures that it churns out recommendations for multiple users, and a search to run search. So these are some of the very common basic backend services that are there in most OTT platforms. Of course, there are multiple more bases, the kind of features that OTT platforms give, but this is something that's common across most and all, in fact. If anyone who wants to run an OTT service will have all this. Now, this is the box on top, which I was talking about OTT services. The systems below, right below, are some of the most interesting systems in videos, very specific to video streaming. And it starts from content being ingested. When I say content being ingested, most OTT platforms get content from content partners who give high resolution, large size videos, right? Because they want to be giving their best quality content to platforms, OTT platforms. So these are big files which are going in gigs. These are ingested into a lot of cloud servers. But when they are eventually streamed, when these content are eventually streamed by users, gigs, no one is going to be streaming gigs of data, right? So there is a process through which, firstly, the hard file, which is an MP4 or whatever, which is the true original copy of the movie or the show, gets converted into a streamable format. And before getting converted into a streamable format, gets adequately compressed in order to be able to stream seamlessly for final audience. And there is this concept, so that's what the video encoder plus packager does, which is kind of compressing and processing data into a streamable format. And then the interesting aspect with streaming is your streaming servers only can be limited. Any OTT platform is bound by having limited number of streaming servers. But how do you ensure that your content kind of reaches the users quickly, right? And with the least latency, stuff like that. And I hear is where CDNs, which is actually, if I had to explain CDNs, which is content delivery network, is a mesh of servers hosted on telecom operator data centers to be able to deliver the last mile for most uh, last mile delivery of most OTT content. So this is that, and this and a basic understanding of all of this might be very useful in kind of discussing some of the points that we'll be discussing going ahead. So with this, I'll move to the next, which is the challenges. Yeah, so these are the 6 challenges I thought I will focus on. Um, and let's start with first. I think eliminate buffering, right? I think any of us who's using an OTT video streaming platform today, including the very well known YouTube itself, we have experienced buffering, which is the rotor, as you see in the screenshot, the rotor going on and on, whether it was while we are on the move, because it could be because of patchy networks, it could be because of multiple things. We get these, sometimes it keeps buffering to a some of these platforms we've had experiences where it keeps buffering to an end with an error message at the end, right? So this is a constant challenge every streaming service faces today, right? And why is it important for them to stream? Because that determines whether you have given the first right impression to your users or not, right? And most users who want to stream online, on mobiles especially, want to be having a seamless experience. So as I suggest, why is it important? Because if you keep buffering, if your content keeps buffering, your users are going to leave. They are not going to stay on your platform because for them, the platform is not working. Secondly, if you stream buffer less while watching, you're going to get the user to watch longer. And that is and that I've personally seen, because when we have made optimizations in order to reduce what's called a buffering rate or a buffering rate on videos, on live streams, on normal VOD streams, we have seen anywhere between 6 to 10% increase in engagement rate. So what is it that what are those things that organizations are doing, most OTT platforms are doing to kind of eliminate buffering, right? Uh, well, CDN is one of the first important things, because that is responsible for last mile delivery from a architecture perspective. It also does the very important job of caching, right? Which is, so there is this concept of origin and POPs. Origins are the original source of your streaming files, which is your streaming servers. These are then cached on what's called as CDN POPs, which is essentially so what CDN CDN, in addition to being a bunch of well-distributed geographically distributed servers which help users stream content basis which the closest server is, also does this intelligently by pairing well with telecom operators. So most CDNs use telecom operator data centers and are sitting on top of that and ensure that their content partners' content is cached on them. And uh, well, now the CDN, there is not just one CDN provider. Probably a couple of years back, like how we have 40 odd OTT platforms, we have multiple CDN providers today, right? Uh, and one of the important metrics that uh, PMs kind of or OTT platforms track is how is your buffering across regions, and how is, because the same CDN could be doing a great job in one state and not doing a great job in another state. So this was a few years back when we had limited options with CDN providers. We were restricted by the concept, most OTT platforms were restricted by the concept of relying on how effective the CDN providers were going to be. With time, what's happened is, and which brings me to the last point of efficient CDN, is a concept of CDN load balancing, which is essentially your video player, your platform making a decision between multiple CDNs. So, uh, um, for example, let's say in CDN provider 1 versus CDN provider 2, if a CDN provider 1 is a player of a particular OTT platform in real time, is able to measure the performance of a CDN provider in one state versus another CDN provider, then today what OTT platforms are trying to do is to reliably switch real time from one to other to be able to give a seamless experience. So there are a bunch of things around how to make a how to kind of deliver effectively last mile using CDNs is being done. The other aspect in your the other aspect is the video player itself, right? Um, Most of you, when you're using your mobile, when you're using your OTT platforms, I'm guessing have seen this player setting called Auto, right? Auto is nothing but this mode in which um, the quality of video played is basis the quality of network that you're at, or the network strength of your Wi-Fi or your data network, and that is called adaptive bitrate streaming, right? And most players, most OTT platforms, um, now it's become very common. But about 3-4 years back, uh, it was the first step towards ensuring uh, a user, the final user, gets a non-buffering experience, right? And and of course, over time, people have made multiple more optimizations in on their video player in order to ensure that the users are able to watch something quickly, right? And 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 one more important thing is how much how effectively you kind of tackle buffering is also a function of how effectively you're able to reduce the event final file size that is being streamed by the user, and that depends on video compression. I will talk about video compression a little more later, but that is also an important function in reducing buffering, right? Um well, this brings me to the next challenge, which is mobile data consumption, right? So, a lot of us must be surprised as to the fact that it's no doubt that data has become much cheaper today, especially after the advent of Geo uh, and slashing of mobile data rates in the last 3-4 years. But with so many options on a user mobile phone today, the users are still data conscious, and that's what I wanted to show. And I just had to kind of, when I was making the slide, I had to just reiterate and go back to Play Store to check multiple platforms, and these Play Store comments or feedback are not from just one OTT platform. These are from the top 3-4 platforms that we have in the country. So, and you can see how users are very consciously talking about how platforms can suck mobile data. So, how do you ensure that while streaming, you're not draining data of your users? It's the next challenge, right? And and let me go to that. So, in order to discuss how most platforms are trying to tackle this, it's important to kind of talk about how the source video, which I spoke about in the slide where which had architecture, about how the source video file becomes streamable, right? And and this kind of technology has been evolving over the last 5 years quite rapidly, 5-6 years quite rapidly. So there are two aspects. One is encoding, which I was talking about, which is essentially making the source video file, which is a huge multi-gig gigabyte size file, uh, into a compressed file. So that is a lossy process in the sense, when you're trying to compress files of huge sizes, you're obviously going to lose some kind of information and stuff like that. So, so encoding, which is the process of compressing video and changing the format, is very, very important in order to decide what the final size of the file is going to be that is streamed by the user. And the final size of of the file that is going to be streamed by the user will decide how much data on his mobile phone is going to be consumed, right? So so encoding as a process has has been very, very important and is a very important step here. Encoding, the effectiveness of encoding is decided by the codec used. The codec used is the standard that most platforms are using in order to kind of compress video. And this is that binary, is that unit, is that important aspect which is kind of changing over time. H.264 might be a terminology that some of you must have heard. It was the most commonly used codec in most streaming services till about a couple of years back. And what is happening today is that advanced codecs, advanced codecs today, which are compressing videos much better without losing quality, such as an HEVC or H.265, which is a successor to H.264, and VP9, which is probably owned by Google today. And more recently, there's also a standard called AV1. So codecs play a very important role. Codecs have modern, or rather more later codecs or recent codecs have managed to reduce file size by 50% or lesser than what it was in the age-old H.264 days, right? This is encoding. Then there is a concept of transcoding. Once you decide how much you've reduced all your file sizes, there is an important aspect of being able to recreate the compressed video into multiple resolutions, and that is what we call as the ladder, which is, hey, do you want a 180p, do you want a 240p, what are the resolutions and the bit rates that correspond to each resolution that you need for a specific file on video, right? Do you need 4-5 resolutions? You just need 4 resolutions? How many resolutions? And that's how transcoding as a process is important, because transcoding will decide what is your highest resolution for that particular video and what is the lowest resolution to which you can go. And how is the ladder, and how this ladder will ensure that when you're in auto mode, it switches between resolutions effectively, right? With this, I'll probably move on to this. So this is something I feel is very interesting. Please pardon me if I'm getting into a little details, but I want to spend some time talking about codecs here, just to give a sense of how moving codecs has logically been able to reduce size, right? So let's take the example of H.264 and H.265 here. What used to happen with H.264 was information used to be stored. And see, after all, video is a bunch of frames, bunch of photos put together, right? So compression happens at each frame, which is each photo, each image, right? And so when a video compression literally is how well each frame is compressed better, and how data is stored in each of the frames better and more effectively or more optimized. So I think if you had to look at H.264 had what's called macro blocks, which was either 4x4 or 16x16 pixel sizes in which information was stored, right? It's quite dense. So if you look at H.264 here, the maximum that a macro block could be was about 16x16 pixel. What happened with H.265, the fundamental difference that it brought into was that the sizes of your blocks need not just be restricted to 16x16, but you could store information, say, to a maximum of 64x64 block sizes. So what this essentially ensured is the number of boxes reduce, and the information stored in them obviously could reduce along with it, right? And of course, so this is a common standard change that has come with codecs, but a lot of OTT platforms are working on top of it to kind of optimize this better from a compression perspective. And this is very interesting because this is fundamental, and I think it is very underrated. Not many platforms talk about it, that the importance of encoding to giving a very seamless experience to OTT platforms is quite underrated, because not many people know what is happening behind the scenes, right? And with that, I probably will go to the next topic. So we spoke about buffering, we spoke about mobile data consumption. A similar topic is also about latency during live streaming. And and it's similar in the sense here latency is not the time taken to load a video file, but essentially how behind are you to real television, right? And that's a challenge that a platform like Hotstar had to solve because they had millions of users watching cricket and they had many more millions watching on television. If they were much more farther ahead from television, most users might probably just go back to television and watch it because if they were at home. Uh, and and they had a kind of, and they were working on how to reduce, I think when in about 2016, 17, the difference between television and real live streaming was about 55 seconds, if I'm not wrong, 50 to 55 seconds. So live stream on mobile was about 55 seconds uh, behind broadcast. I think there were multiple optimizations made in order to reduce that to 15. A lot of it had to do with some of the topic that I just covered, which is encoding, to essentially ensure that in that whole workflow, which is this diagram, sorry, which is this diagram. How do you ensure the bottom part of this diagram? How do you measure the latency that each aspect of this workflow adds, and what tweaks need to be made? So there were multiple that needed to be made, and that must have been a very interesting problem to solve for many video engineers and the product managers involved in solving it, because it is not just one aspect that needs to be done better. It's not just one formula that can click, because it's a quite complicated system wherein you have to improve your encoder, you have to improve your source that is plugged into your encoder, you have to make optimizations on player, like I had said, and then you have to measure what each change has had in improving latency. And instrumentation in a system, in a very in a multi-faceted system like this isn't easy, but it's very important to achieve results, right? So with that, I think that is latency during live streaming. I go to the next challenge, I think, which is a constant challenge for uh, most platforms, and I think some of you uh, had also had questions around a lot. This is probably something that most people are interested in about as well, which is because there is so much talk about uh, uh, how some platforms do extremely well in terms of recommendations as opposed to others and stuff like that. I think it's user engagement, keeping users engaged is a constant challenge for most users. Of course, one of the first aspects most people think about when, and not the only aspect, of course, that's what I'm going to talk about next, not the only aspect about keeping users engaged is personalization. But personalization is a must in most OTT platforms. Personalization has become a hygiene factor in most OTT platforms. The question is how sophisticated your personalization is. That's all, right? So, so if I'm to talk about personalizations, I generally like to approach any problem to the low-hanging fruits, because when you start from 0 to 1 in your journey of scratch to kind of building to scale, one of the most important things is to see how your low-hanging fruits give you huge rewards, because when you're in small scale, making small changes, making obvious changes gives you a lot more effort, a lot more returns. When you scale up, the amount of effort put to get incremental benefits is much different than much more, right? Which is probably common knowledge. But again, reiterating here, some of the low-hanging fruits that I've seen in my OTT experience so far is to bake, is to probably first give, for any user, give language and genre-based recommendations. Is to probably, I don't know how many, I think most of you who use an OTT platform would see continue watching as a section. But this continue watching as a section is an extremely useful feature for most platforms, because what it essentially does is it helps user get to the video that he was watching much quickly. And while it seems like a very obvious feature to have today, uh, 4 years back when we implemented it for the first time in Hotstar, it was giving us great benefits, simply because it, it people do not want to keep browsing and getting to their video. Continue watching us as a feature was for all users who know they have left their content in the middle. They want to come back and start watching it from the point they left it at. So there is clear intent, and people, we show it, and it is that particular section is shown for people who have actually watched content, and it's probably a very low hanging fruit of personalization that gives a lot of benefits for most OTT platforms. Um, and obviously, one cue that most platforms can take is language and genre that the user has been interested in, given similar genre and language. It's a very basic form of personalization or recommendations that you can talk about. Still, I think the biggest challenge that remains for most OTT platforms is, how do you convert your uh, first-time users? And that's what I call as cold start. Cold start is a recommendation terminology which talks about recommendations to be given to a fresh user, a new user, right? And interestingly, you would be surprised to know that most OTT platforms, of all people, of all DAUs who come onto a platform, close to, depending on how big the platform is, 25 to 30% don't stream at all, right? Um, and this is from some of my past experience. 25 to 30% don't stream at all because either they come and they don't discover what they want to watch, or people who came first time did not find what they were looking for, right? So, or people who launched the app, or who installed the app or the platform, came to the platform because of some user recommendations or some recommendation, or because of some ads, don't know what to watch on the content. So cold start is still a huge problem. Uh, what are the suggestions you provide to your first time user? Most platforms, what they do today is to probably recognize the region that you've come from, uh, kind of predict what the popular content, or find out what the popular content is in that region and kind of recommend that. Um, in fact, most platforms recommend what is popular in their platform to kind of take their best effort and show the best content on the platform to their users, first time users. Another thing, the other way that a lot of users try tackling cold start as a problem is to ask the user itself to understand what he wants, or he or she wants to watch on the platform, which is what we call as user onboarding. And of course, there are two trains of thought here. Some is, and the decision to be made as to whether you need to have a elaborate user onboarding process or not is uh, is up to the platform itself, because that needs understanding of the kind of users you have on the platform. Are they people who know what they're watching? Are they people, for example, subscription platforms? So if someone has subscribed, paid money to your content, it's a good idea to ask him because there is high intent. They've paid content. He's paid money to watch. It's a good idea to ask what his preferences are going to be as a first-time user. Of course, Netflix doesn't do that, but there's no harm because there is higher intent, and users still do give responses to kind of say what their preferences are. When it's an AWOD platform, which is advertising VOD based platform, users probably don't have the patience to go through multiple screens of onboarding. So, and then you probably users don't understand what the questions, and it is very important to craft a great onboarding experience, right? So, onboarding as a challenge and how that helps understanding users is something that constantly is evolving. Um, and one school of thought is, don't let there be no onboarding. Take the user, show him content, see his browsing behavior, if the platform is able to understand that if you're able to understand that the user is not able to make a choice, then probably ask for his preferences and all that, right? So that's another school of thought. So I think there is no one solution. Personally, I've seen onboarding work and I've seen onboarding not work uh, um, as well. And it is important to kind of iteratively keep improving this so that you improve conversion as a metric when users first-time users launch, right? Of course, the last part, which I'm no machine learning expert, so I'm not going to dwell deep into the ML algorithms or the models that we use. But what I can say is uh, there is something that not a lot of people know is there is every OTT platform has a huge operations team as well, whose job is to enrich metadata of all the content of the catalog on the platform. Metadata, as you know, is information about the catalog. Metadata is about content that uh, additional information about it, whether it is title, genre, actor, tags, etc., etc. That is a foundational step to having a good recommendation engine. It's a sanity thing again, like I said, and most OTT platforms do it. There are multiple people sitting and ensuring the catalog is enriched with enough metadata. And so the richer your metadata, obviously, the better your recommendations. But more importantly, uh, what also defines success of your recommendation is having how strong your algorithm is, how strongly, and at what scenarios, right? Your ML algorithm on your homepage might be very different. The algorithm used on homepage might be very different to what they use on a video page, on a movie page. Um, and because on the home page, you probably want to just use the understanding of past behavior of the user on the platform and give him recommendations. But when user has gone into a video detail page or a movie page or a show page, you probably want to give him or her a mixture of uh, content related to this kind of show or movie, plus what he's probably likely to watch from his past history. So yes, and that's a constant. I think like how ML models keep improving across multiple industries. This is another aspect that has to keep improving, and is a constant challenge for our platform. Another aspect I want to talk about, I don't know how many of you are noticing this in OTT platforms, is the use of gamification, right? Um, and gamification, I mean, is to incentivize users through new concepts, um, which probably nudge users to watch more, stay on the platform more, come back again. So methods to make the platform stickiness through gamification. So one of the ways that one of the platforms is doing, Hotstar did it, tried doing it with uh, watch and play, wherein they said they had already done a great amount of job in uh, creating a fan graph. Right, a fan graph is nothing but in a live stream. There's a graph that runs, and users could just go back, click on those graphs, and see what the high points were of the match and go. Uh, they wanted to make it a little more social. They wanted to introduce contests here, and they came up with this watch and play. So this watch and play is essentially nudging users, in addition to watching um, the live match, how can a user interact with the live match interact about the live match with other friends was the starting point to creating something like a watch and play. And as news has it, I think it had phenomenal success when it was introduced. Even at MX Player, interestingly, our gamification was not just about gamification as such. We just introduced, we are an entertainment platform at MX Player, and we introduced games, which as a vertical in addition to videos, and that's seen a lot of traction because as a vertical, gaming is very sticky, and people keep coming back to keep playing games. And especially when you reward them and create tournaments and create an environment where they can compete with other people, it becomes very engaging. Uh, that is one way that MX Player has taken now. If you look at Sony Live, as I've shown, they have tried using games to kind of um, engage with users especially games themed around the shows that they have, and uh, kind of engage users in this using this. And again, here they have a coin system. There is again the reward caches. So you essentially what platforms are looking to do, and I think this will be interesting in the next couple of years, is there are going to be contests to engage users and different kind of contests. Uh, the interactiveness on the video player is going to keep improving over time. There are going to be games. There are games, but there are also going to be more uh, games and gamification ideas um, in the OTT, introduced in OTT platforms, because that platforms are realizing it to be a great way to make them sticky, right? And finally, some of the players some of the players like a Flipkart or an MX player have realized that casual gaming as an additional vertical is going to be very effective as a strategy, right? Uh, Both from engagement and even later on from monetization perspective. So I think I'm kind of tapering into the two next sections, which I'm not going to delve deep into. But again, these are challenges that the OTT industry is facing. So I will kind of talk about them for a couple of minutes each. Content security is a definite challenge for most OTT platforms, because OTT platforms are spending huge amounts of money to kind of produce their own content and own the content that they have rights to. Uh, and obviously, they're taking a lot of steps around it. Some of the basic things that they do is encryption to ensure that people who are or all people who are intercepting calls between their clients and servers do not get to play the content at all. They are also, and there's this concept called digital rights management, which is becoming more and more common. Digital rights management ensures that your content is bound to that particular device and that particular user, and no one else can play that. And and there is an agreement between the device or the user, registered user, and the streaming server in order to ensure that streaming only happens on this authorized user. So DRM as a concept is becoming more popular. In addition, I think the whole system that we spoke about, which is the whole architecture, is getting platforms are trying to kind of secure all those systems in order to ensure that no one jailbreaks in, and kind of steals all any content, right? That's about content security. Last aspect is monetization. I think some of you guys were interested in how OTT platforms make money. I think in terms of, I've kind of listed them in what I see is the most commonly used methodology, business models. AVOD is nothing but advertising VOD. VOD is nothing but video on demand. Uh, Most platforms which aim to reach scale take particularly an AVOD approach. I think it started with YouTube, uh, which said, "Hey, we are going to be a free platform, free to watch, but we're going to be showing ads to users." And there are multiple challenges there. What are the kind of formats you use, video formats that you use to users? How do you create advertisements which are not very interruptive? I know it's counterintuitive to say that, hey, uh, have ads and not keep it interruptive. But what brands are trying to do and platforms are trying to do together is to create uh, more, more better experience of ads, um, keep it as non-interruptive, experiment with multiple formats at multiple points in the user journey, and all that. Uh, and I think that's and the other bigger thing about the advertising space, especially in OTT, is to kind of see brands are constantly think about what audience network, about which demand should their audience network plug into, which means um, Google DFP is one kind of a demand network uh, into which most of your audience network is plugged into. Some OTT platforms have decided to just do direct sales and have no other third party get demand for them. Um, And yeah, so I think that's with AWOD in general. SWOD, which is subscription based, uh, you see what the and I think there is most like Netflix and Prime Video, Prime great examples of export platforms. They're purely subscription based, wherein you can't watch a single piece of content without uh, subscribing to the platform, subscribing to the and paying money, right? And versus Hotstar, which is kind of taking a hybrid approach, wherein which is a freemium model, wherein some of their content that they have is AWOD and some of the content that they have is SWOD, and that's a strategy that a lot of OTT platforms are also taking up, basis what their business goals are, right? Immediate business goals are. I think the challenges with subscription is because in generally the challenge with a subscription platform, any subscription platform in India, is what is the right price point at which you must have this particular platform, right? What is the right price point that you must be charging your customer? And that involves quite a number of calculations. Um, I think a lot of it, some of it I've seen in Hotstar, uh, and uh, and I think how do you kind of retain your subscribed user to ensure your ARR is good and improving over time are certain things that they keep thinking about. And yeah, and some platforms are also, I think there's a great opportunity today. If I like 5 different platforms, I have to go subscribe into each of these platforms, right? And probably then when I subscribe to the platform, I probably access all the premium content, all their premium content. TWOD as a concept is essentially to say, how can I rent a specific content for a specific amount of time, something like what you do in Google Play, with Google Movies and stuff like that. Some platforms are experimenting with that, but I think not many are going to go that route. Um, SWOD kind of ensures stickiness on platforms, so for a lot of platforms, I think prefer SWOD. These are some of the aspects of monetization that I had to cover today. With that, I think I'm done. All I have to say is to keep streaming. Next time you stream, you will know a lot of components. I hope some of what I've told uh, has helped some of you understand this space, has probably been interesting for some of you. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Thanks a lot, Ashwin. It was really helpful and insightful. So we have some questions in our chat section. We can pick it up from there.
Sure.
So yeah. First question we have from Vishal. What are the key revenue generators for OTT platforms? I think we have
Yeah.
already covered this.
Yeah, so I think that I have covered. But yeah, key revenue generators, like I said, is um, depends on the platform. If you are an advertising, if you have an AWOT platform which is advertising based, your revenue is going to be from advertising. If you're a subscription only based platform, it's going to be from subscription. And I think some of the most platforms are trying to create a hybrid model.
Right. Next question we have from Prajwal. How difficult was the transition for MX Player from being media player to becoming a video streaming app?
I think that's a very good question, and well, there is no one single answer. It was not. It was quite an iterative approach. Um, so I think the hypothesis with which, and I try talking about why I think MX Player chose that route, right? If you think about it, um, when in fact when Times Internet acquired MX Player, the intention was most OTT platforms today uh, and in my view, most OTT platforms today are trying to acquire users, right? And user acquisition is not cheap. But what MX Player did effectively said, and when you look at MX Player, you had a huge distribution of users. You had a huge set of users coming to your platform and watching videos every day, right? So you had a huge pool of people coming and watching videos, right? And the hypothesis was that with data becoming cheaper, how do you uh, if the hypothesis was, if we test whether if we give the right kind of content to these users, uh, will they stream? So we kind of, this is the hypothesis which we built, because they are after all watching videos. If we could understand something about their behavior and probably give them relevant videos, would they stream? Because they probably have access to a network that is giving them 1 GB streaming free every day. So I think that's a hypothesis with which we started. I think there was first a POC done on, which was open to a few beta testers, to see how many of these users. Two, three things were to be decided. One was, what kind of content would probably get some of these users to stream content online. Second aspect was, what was the UX to be built for these users, right? Um, and I think we started with some hypotheses around it to say, um, we know that our bread and butter is being a media player. So we don't want to spoil that chance. We suddenly don't want to make it a OTT platform when a user opens it one day. We want to probably tell the user, listen, in addition to having a local player, you also have a huge library of videos which you can play from. So I think that was the UX angle to it. And the content piece angle to it was to figure out, and it was not, in order to kind of figure out what the content library that is going to be played, or that you needed to convert these users, you need to understand the user base better. So uh, the user base of MX Player, as opposed to many other OTT players, wasn't very urban. It split tier 2, tier 3 equally as well, uh, quite quite well. So the content strategy, or the content acquisition strategy, also had to be accordingly done. And so I think how difficult, if I had to answer how difficult it was, well, it was difficult in the sense it was challenging, I would say, because you had to iteratively understand your user better, without not spoiling your primary use case. The bread and butter was, like I said, the local media player. But we also wanted to create a great user experience for users who said, hey, I'm ready to browse some of your library. So that's why if you open the app, we have consciously made the home page for the users as it is for the last uh, 8, 9 years. It's been the same. Just that we've added tabs at the bottom. We've also found out different points in the user journey where we could tell the user, communicate effectively to the user, hey, listen, there is this feature of streaming content, and these are some of these content library that we have. So I think it is a very iterative journey, and over time, once we understood, we have learned through multiple iterations that as to how to convert some of these users to streaming users. That is
Thanks. I
a
hope this answers Prajwal. Next one is from Tanmay. What is the bandwidth or internet speed required to live stream video to users?
well, ideally, even a, I mean, even a half Mbps connection should be good enough to stream most live videos, right? Um, because uh, because the ladder, like I spoke to you some time back, uh, has around, I think the lowest, if I'm not wrong, must be anywhere between 220 to 230 kbps. In certain cases, it's around 180 to 230 kbps. So ideally, anything around half an Mbps should be good to play in an ideal condition. But when you're when you're when you're using a half Mbps connection, 1/8 of it is available to the player. So I would ideally say the 1 Mbps connection, 1 to 1.5 Mbps connection, should be ideal to kind of play live streaming, to have a seamless experience. What happens in lower, especially with live cricket and live matches, is uh, it's important. You can have a pixelated experience, but a pixelated experience does not uh, help stream content with clarity, especially a game like cricket where a small ball has to be viewed and the traveling of the ball has to be viewed. So I think theoretically half an Mbps is good enough, but anything about 1 Mbps should be great to stream seamlessly.
Next one is from Navan. From where or how to start recommendation engine?
Where and how to start recommendation engine? I think yeah. So I think this is a very philosophically, it's a question of whether you want to build or buy, right? Most OTT platforms, some OTT platforms have chosen to buy, some OTT platforms have chosen to build, right? And that call needs to be taken at the beginning because, like at MX Player, uh, we have a huge recommendation engine team, and we consciously chose to build because we wanted control, and that was our expertise because we were doing that for quite some time. We used some of our ML engineers in order to improve our transcoding and encoding process as well. So so it varies from organization to organization. So I think the important question to answer first is to build or buy. Once the question of build or buy is done, and some point, importantly, in certain cases, uh, if there is a confusion between build or buy, some of the platforms today are ready to kind of test this, validate to see whether their building capability is going to be better than the features available in market through some of these services. So if there is confusion and if you think you have capability, engineering capability to build in-house and want to test with something that's in the market, one good way is to probably A/B test, set some of the goals of what you want from your recommendation and A/B test them and see which wins. But I think a bigger call needs to be taken between build and buy, and it's not an easy process. It's a continuous process. It keeps evolving. Uh, and your models, and if you're doing it in-house, will get better over time or with more data and all that. So I think, and within, once you've decided what is the engine that you're going to use, um, within that, I think the question is go after the low hanging, my experience is go after the low hanging fruits, get your basics right, uh, and then keep uh, finding out use cases where you want to use your recommendation engine more and more in your user experience, in your user flows. And I think that's the general approach I would be taking.
Thanks. Next one is from Rituraj. Where does transcoding happen? Client side or server side?
Transcoding definitely happens at the server side. Um, there is just the all that the client does is to be able to have a player that can decode the encoded video that's coming from the servers. So transcoding definitely happens on server side.
Next one. How you have tackled video buffering issues since you have worked in Hotstar? Why they have not implemented higher playback speeds? Is there because DRM implementation?
Higher playback speeds. Have you tackled video buffering? Yet, I don't know what exactly higher playback speeds mean. Higher playback speeds, I'm assuming he means shorter time to play the video. Is that it? I am assuming. Let me assume two things because he's talking about buffering. Um, I am assuming that he or she is talking about um, higher playback speeds here. Possibly means longer time to stream the first frame. Does this have anything to do with DRM implementation? Should not. Should not have much to do with DRM implementation. It's possible, of course, in DRM implementation, theoretically right that DRM implementation has additional calls as opposed to a non-DRM implemented content, but that should not be the only reason for longer durations for the video to stream. Uh, and I think I don't think I'm not very sure if the question, I don't know because it's been quite some time since I left Hotstar. So I don't know if I can answer why they haven't implemented something or not. But should it be because of DRM implementation? DRM implementation has some effect, but could not be the only reason why uh, you have buffering issues. How can non-engineers who have management consulting background become a PM at OTTs? Uh, Which PMBA role should be targeted? Okay, that's a good, interesting question. So, non-gen, I think PMing at. Uh, so, firstly, I'd like to split this question. One is how to become a PM at OTTs as opposed to others. Well, if you, it's not very different. PMing at OTTs is not very different to the with probably any PMing at any other industry like an e-commerce or a I would say fintech, but maybe or any logistics solution, anything else, right? Because the PM is doing the same set of things: identifying the problem, understanding the user, trying to give him a great UX, working across teams to build a tech solution for the problems that he wants to solve, and all that. So I think, and I myself have interviewed quite a few PMs. We don't uh, essentially discriminate between people coming from OTT and non-OTT backgrounds. We generally, most platforms uh, are looking for general PM expertise. Uh, and the second thing also is, uh, I think unless the role demands some specific expertise like ad tech or I don't know, maybe video engineering and stuff like that. And other than that, it's a generic PM. There are a lot of general PMs who have worked in multiple industries and started working in the OTT industry. Now, how can a management consultant become a PM at OTT? Um, I think I think one way to do it is if at your one way that could help is if you've had any management consulting background in the media and entertainment industry, that could help you because you then know about some of the industry problems that OTTs or media and entertainment industry faces. So one of the things is if you have a background of working in the media and entertainment space, that will help. Um, and I think which pre-MBA roles should be targeted, that depends on the person. So if you have, again, I would say if you have any media and entertainment experience, if you have probably some form of digital marketing experience, some form of product development experience, um, all that could help. But yeah, these are things that I can think of. Right? How do you promote subscriptions? How do you promote subscriptions for premium content? Um well, that's a very interesting question. I think uh, it's a very again. Um, I think Hotstar tries doing this in their freemium model. Whenever you have a freemium model, um, there are a few things users do. Right. Uh, one way is you probably let your users engage with your platform first of all, sample content on your platform. Then you identify the right amount of time after, and this needs historical data. You look at historical data to see what are the kind of users who have converted, what has been their behavior, how much have they engaged on the platform before converting, and all that. Probably find the right amount of time where you should start nudging people who have sample free content. And here I'm assuming premium content, right? Um, if it's a freemium platform, your platform has a freemium kind of a model. You look at the right time, find the right points where you have to nudge the users, then probably recommend premium content. So if a user has been if a user has been coming back to the platform multiple times and shown intent, there's a likelihood that some of the recommended premium content converts into buying a premium package. The other approach is within a show. So I think OTT platforms are yet to do, but one of the experiments that I think might happen soon is probably keep your first episode, especially with web series and stuff like that, is probably keep your first episode of a big web show free, get your users to hook, and you probably then nudge them. People who want to watch from the second episode probably start uh, subscribing for it. Again, this is a concept where you let the user sample, identify identify more serious users from that and convert them, so that you go after the right audience. I think with live streaming, you already see what Hotstar is doing, or what even a Sony Live is doing, where they give you about 10 of basis whatever map they've done, a few minutes of free streaming, and after that they charge the customer to watch. So I think those are some ideas through which you can promote subscription for premium package. How is CDN load balancing achieved in technical terms? Um, so how is CDN load balancing achieved in technical terms is essentially, in technical terms, there is a layer before the player talks to the CDN, which decides which CDN is performing well in that region, and accordingly chooses the CDN from which that particular player has to, or rather that particular app or that particular user has to stream. If I had to explain more in detail, I'll take more than this call, but if you had to just understand, imagine that right now in Chennai, tap on a particular video in a specific region in my city, the tower next to me, so there is a pairing of CDNs in the tower next to me. There is a layer between me and the CDNs which decides, saying, hey, in this particular region, pairing of CDN 1 with this telecom operator is better than pairing of CDN 2 with this telecom operator. And then at real time, the CDN URL is given to the user. And I mean, that's in simple terms. I mean, further details will need another session itself, I think. What else? What are the metrics you maintain as a product manager? Okay, I think this question got repeated multiple times, so I probably will take this question. What are metrics you maintain as a product manager for MX? See, I think as a product manager for MX, I maintain, the first and foremost is to see the aggregate engagement, right? Aggregate engagement, because let's say a North Star for us is total engagement on the platform. Total engagement on the platform is a function of how many users have come and how many minutes they have streamed for. And again, that can be broken down further to see how many users have come from each channel, right? And if I just had to look at users, to say users on the platform, DAUs, that can be broken down to how many are first-time DAUs versus how many times are returning DAUs. That means I have to keep a tab on retention when I'm talking about returning users. And retention, then I have to probably look at daily retention versus weekly retention to see how does a day's DAU compare to last week same day or yesterday, what the fall could be. And in terms of, then you probably match what the engagement has been from each channel of user acquisition, and see if there is what the trends have been. The other thing is also to kind of keep a tab on functional tech, non-functional tech parameters, like how is the latency been for live streaming, how is the buffering rate been, how is the startup times been, what is the error rate been on player, what are the crash rates on the app, and all this. So I think these are some of the metrics that any OTT PM would be looking at in general.
Ashwin, I just have one question. It's me who asked that question actually.
Yeah.
Ranjit here.
Yeah.
As a product manager for MX, you also compete against other platforms like Netflix and Amazon Prime. Let's take the example of Amazon Prime. Right?
Okay.
Amazon Prime, for example, their user acquisition cost is very less. In terms, the primary user which comes to Amazon today don't come in for seeing their movies. They come in for other aspects of Amazon. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's more for the hyperlocal delivery.
Okay.
And and music, the videos and music are only an add-on to Amazon, the main business of Amazon.
Okay.
So if you look at that from that point of view, need not really spend much in terms of user acquisition because they already have a list of customers who's using Amazon on that platform, right? Now, in terms of MX, right, while you say that your metrics are maintained in terms of weekly retention and monthly retention, say if somebody like me, right, I don't use MX much
Mm-hmm.
because most of the new movies are already come on Amazon platform probably within a month or two, which I can really wait.
Mm-hmm.
So when you compete against a platform like Amazon, how do you think this metrics which you say now, how do you think that the user acquisition metrics which you say is going to really help? Do you watch it over a period of time and then you retain your readapt your strategies? Do you go back and tell your team, okay, these are the strategies? Something, say for example, advertisements on your platform, right?
Yeah.
Is something which users don't really like to see. So if I see an Amazon movie today, there are no advertisements in the movie, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in that concept, Amazon really don't ask the advertisers money. I mean, there's no advertisement, so there's nobody who's really advertising their products on their movie platform. But for you, you can't adapt that kind of a strategy because you would need more of revenue when compared to an Amazon, right? So for you, you need advertisement. In that terms, right? How do
Mm-hmm.
you retain an user?
So I think what you're alluding to is how do you calculate, how do you make the LTV and CAC meaningful, right?
Right.
And probably how do you measure whether your LTV is greater than CAC or not, right?
Right.
Which is the acquisition cost. So I think it's a good question. And I think even with Prime, though they bundle a lot of services together, I think as a Prime PM would obviously be very uh, curious about how many of attribution. We'd be very curious about attribution. How many of Prime subscriptions have been at the back of videos as well, not just hyperlocal, right? But yes, hyperlocal subscriptions might driving a lot of Prime subscriptions and thus getting them a lot of Prime viewers as well, right? In the case of MX, MX is slightly different in the sense, like I said, the biggest platform for us is, let's say, Android, and we don't have to go acquire users there. That's why we are slightly unique because we have a set of users who we are trying to convert, right? And we still have a mobile website where we acquire users through multiple channels, and there we are uh, very careful about what is the cost to go acquire users, right? And before being able to acquire those users. So we kind of track what the CPMs are on mobile web, because we also, and how do you calculate returns is to see what the cost is, not just per getting a user to come and sample, but to get users to stream X minutes on the platform, right? So it's not just a cost per install, cost per impression kind of a model, but you also have to think of cost per minute, because engagement then drives advertising, and advertising. So the greater the engagement, the greater the advertising dollars. Am I able to answer that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Um, can you shed more light on what works best? Oh yes, I think one question I also wanted to think is any possibility of gamification resulting or driven by AR implementation? Yes, it's very possible. The only thing is, I think AR is a little far-fetched right now, I feel, because I think production costs are huge. Um, it also needs infra to kind of produce at scale. Uh, it is going to be very interesting to see how it shapes. There is definitely going to be some advances made in AR implementation, um, in both in the video streaming industry as well as in gaming industry. A lot of AR is going to come in. The only thing I am curious to know is, right now we are all excited about the explosion of smartphones. So if AR is going to get exciting, we have to conceptualize how AR on mobile phones is going to look. And both from a capability of mobile phones as well as capability of producing. I think that might be the only challenge, but definitely I do see efforts being made on it. Should we go each question? Should I specifically choose some question? Piyush, do you have any suggestions?
So I think we can choose one or two questions, and we can
Okay.
wind up.
Okay. Okay. Start app not working. I'll just go one after the other in that case. Where do you see more penetration of OTT within India, especially existing cable infrastructure? Existing cable operators also have streaming apps. Unless contents are improved, how new OTT platforms can significantly increase revenue? Okay, so I think and this is just a personal view. I think the question here is, where do you see penetration of OTT happening? I think like how penetration of OTT will happen where penetration of mobile phones are also happening more. And the interesting thing is, if cable infrastructure, when I'm assuming cable infrastructure, people are talking about cable TV infrastructure. Well, uh, cable TV being there is not a hindrance to OTT penetrating into that market where cable TV is dense. And the way I look at it is the penetration obviously is going to be more and skewed towards the next set of penetration is going to be set more and skewed towards tier 2 and tier 3, but not because it's already not there in tier 2 and tier 3. Tier 2 and tier 3, there are a lot of people streaming content today. It's just because mobile smartphone penetration is going to be larger there, right? And that's what I feel. I think content improving on each of these apps. See, today, like I said, OTT as a sector is growing, so there are a lot of people showing interest. I think it is not possible for all of these platforms to continue staying like this because some of the bigger players most of the traffic will be into some of the bigger players. Some of the smaller players might not be able to survive. Some of the smaller players are probably already syndicating their own content on other bigger platforms. I think what might happen in the future is some of these platforms might just choose to become content companies or content platforms and not necessarily OTT platforms. So, uh, so I think we will see some, and I think most people realize that we will see some form of consolidation sometime. Till then, people will differentiate themselves by the content that they have or the exclusive content that they have. When they cannot continue doing that, they might just probably syndicate that content and make money out of it. Any other question? Oh, in the whole value chain of delivering content, what will become a commodity available to all players? What will be differentiator in providing experience to end user? I think some of it is already becoming a commodity. In the whole value chain of delivering, having a good content management system or having a good uh, uh, probably good subscription platform having good, some of the backend services are going to be commoditized. Uh, having some of having analytics maybe, as the way I see it. Though we have our own BI systems, I think at scale, if I have to start a OTT platform tomorrow, I would not be thinking about building my own BI platform. What I'll be more, and if I want to be building a scalable platform further, is some of the other things which I don't want to commoditize, is especially building my own player, video player, which is building my own encoder, which is building my own transcoding algorithm, which is building my own recommendation engines and stuff like that. I think those can be used as differentiators to create a better platform, to create a better experience for users.
Thanks. I think we can wind up the session here. We are already on time.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh, so thanks a lot, Ashwin, for taking our time and conducting such an insightful session.
Thank you.
I'm sure everyone would have a lot of takeaways from today's session.
Thank you. I think it was a great experience talking to all of you, interacting with all of you. Hope I was able to add some value. Hope I was able to talk about things that some of you wanted to listen about, to discuss about. Yeah. Thanks. This was great. Thank you to Pragmatic Leaders for this opportunity.